Alright, so what we're going to be doing in this is we're going to be eliminating the need to drag this formula down. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a formula in this top box here that will automatically generate a formula for everything below it if certain conditions are met. And so this is going to involve several different formulas, but I'm going to walk you through them, so don't worry and don't panic. And so the first thing I'm going to do is just erase all of these formulas because we're going to need to start fresh. Now everything over here, this is no formulas. This is information that you would enter. Let's just add a couple other items over here so we're flushed out. And what is 72 times 15? So what could be $72? I don't know, transport for 15 trips, something like that. I'm going to take the date out for now as well because we're going to talk more about custom date work in another video. I'll just leave it blank for now. Okay, so I hope you guys are ready for this. Okay, so we're going to do a little trick here to make our lives a bit easier. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add a formula here that will automatically calculate downwards. And so to begin with, we're going to type equals, and we're going to go for an array formula. So we're just going to start typing ARR, and there it comes, array formula. And so now it says, okay, so enables the display of values returned from an array formula into multiple rows and or columns. That sounds very confusing. Essentially, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be telling this formula that we want it to look at C2 and then everything down from C2 as well as D2 and everything down from D2. And then it will automatically figure this, that it needs to spread its formula out across all these other cells. However, we also need a condition because we don't want this formula to operate if nothing has been entered over here. So for example, I think we'll use the cost per as our kind of marker for if something exists or not. Because if you don't have a cost per item, then you don't need to calculate anything for it. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically say if there is nothing here, if our Charlie column, our C column is blank, then we're not going to do anything. But if it's not blank, if there's something in here, then we're going to give it a formula to do. So we need to combine a few different formulas in here to make that happen. And so the first thing we're going to do is the formula called if. So it basically says returns a value depending on a logical expression. So a logical expression is, I mean, all of these are just algorithms. So we're going to give it a condition to do this expression, right? To do whatever we want it to do, it's going to be conditional on something. So that's why we use the term if. So what is it? Well, we're going to put another parenthesis there. And so now it's actually giving us help. So it's going to say you have a logical expression, which is basically the condition, and then the value, and then we're going to press comma, and then we're going to type the value if true. So basically, if the condition is true, if it's met, then what do you want to do? And value if false is if the condition is not true, then what do you want to do? So right now we're working in the logical expression. So what is the condition that we want to check for? And that condition is going to be using another formula. So this is formulas within formulas within formulas. The condition that we're going to be checking for is Charlie, is C column blank. So we're using the formula is blank. So is blank is a formula that determines whether the reference cell is empty. So we're going to select that. And of course, you see that opens another parenthesis. And so here we're giving it the value. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on, I'm going to select this cell here. However, I'm going to modify it a little bit. I'm going to type a colon like that. And then I'm going to type C like that. And so what that means is it's looking at the first column and then every column below it. And you'll see why that's important later. And then another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put... Oh, no, I don't think I need to do that. So I'll get into dollar signs later. Dollar signs will basically lock your formula so that they don't transpose. So this is what we're looking for. So we've basically just completed the first part of the if. So if is blank C2 to C. So if anything in here is blank, that's our if condition. So I'm going to close that off, and you'll notice that my help menu here changes from our is blank help. You see here we're on is blank help, but once I close that, is blank help is now done. So now we're going back to what we were before that. This is the if thing. We're now back within the if formula. And so we've completed the logical expression part of this this formula. And so we're going to end this part by pressing comma. And you can see here there's a little comma. So it's telling you have to put a comma to divide these sections. And then notice this text has now become green. So it's telling us, all right, you're moving on to the next section here. And so this is going to be the value if true. So if this column is blank, then if it is blank, what do we do? So if it's blank, what we want it to do is nothing. We want it to return 0. So the way to do that is we're going to put 2 parentheses. Now I could type anything I want in here, like blah, 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 and that would be what it would return. It would return those crazy letters. But if I want it to return nothing, I just put these 2 quotation marks with nothing in between them. And so now I'm going to end this section, this value of true section. I'm going to end that by typing a comma again. And you'll notice again that green text moves to value if false. So if it's false, and remember, what is false? If Charlie column is blank. That's what we're looking at. If C2 is blank. That's the logical expression. That's the thing we're testing for. So if it's false, what that's saying is it's not blank. There's something there. There's some numbers written. There's some text written. There's something there. So if it's not true, what is the value that we want it to do? And in this case, we want it to do a formula. So I'm just going to go ahead and select a parentheses, and I'm going to click on this first number, and then I'm going to type times D2, and done. However, because we're using an array formula, we're going to need to make sure that we tell it that it's not only C2, but it's going to be the whole column. So C2, and then we're going to use the colon to C to give it that whole row. And then again, the same thing over here, D2 to D. And there we go. And so now it's looking really at that first cell, but also all the cells below it. And that's it. We're now done. So we've just given it the value if false. The value if false is that you're multiplying row C by row D, and you're going to do that for every row below. And so we type this one time. So now I'm going to close the parentheses and watch what happens as I close the parentheses. So now we're closing the parentheses around is blank. Now we're closing the parentheses around if. And so that's going to be the last one. So we're done. You see how it highlights those parentheses? So you'll need to put, this is a formula inside a formula inside a formula. So you have to close all the parentheses to end the formulas. And when we're done, we press enter. Now, look what's happened here. I have typed one formula in one place. And what's happening is the rest of the numbers below, there's no formula. There's nothing written here. It's completely blank. I don't have to copy and paste anything down there. However, if I pick a random cell down here and I type a number, immediately this cell comes to life. And it's already telling us the number, the result. Now, if there's nothing there, no problem. It ignores it. If I put something over here, it's going to ignore it. Because again, the metric that we're looking for, we decided, is C, column C. So we're looking in column C to see if C is blank. So if C is blank, it's not going to do anything. However, if I have 10 items and each item costs $2, watch what happens when I press enter. Automatically, it's going to apply that formula. And this is a great trick to save yourself the hassle of having to drag your formulas down again and again and again, right? If I had to drag this down every time I needed to add more lines, now it doesn't matter how many rows you add. It doesn't matter where you go. If I enter a number here and I enter a number here, I get my same formula automatically. This will save you guys a ton of time and a ton of hassle, especially if you want to protect your formulas. If you want to lock a sheet so that people can't accidentally delete something or accidentally mess something up, now you can actually lock column E so that nobody can mess with your formulas. And even if they need to add more rows, even if they need to add at the bottom of your 1,000 rows, you need to add 10 more. When you add them, watch what happens again. it's automatically going to keep that formula spreading infinitely downward without you having to do anything. So this is one of the greatest tricks that I've learned, is using that array formula function in the very first cell and telling it to look not only at the first cell there, but then at everything below it. So again, C2 to C. So we're telling it, we always want you to look at the cell across from it, but then also continue that same process for the entire column of C. All right, so that's hopefully you guys will be able to use this array formula in a couple different situations, and we're going to practice that one more time when we get to the next lesson when we're talking about date. The if formula we're going to use a lot. We're also going to use some other ones like sumif and countifs. Is blank is very useful, but just understanding what we've just done here, I'm just going to go through it with you guys one more time just to make sure you guys are very clear on what we've done. And so again, this is not necessary to do. You can do it the way we went through in lesson 1. However, lesson 1 means that you will constantly have to be dragging your formulas down when you add new rows. You'll have to copy and paste that formula over and over and over again. And if anything happens to that formula anywhere in the spreadsheet, it might not be difficult to notice. In this case, it's literally one formula in one cell that automatically fills out everything below it. So in my opinion, this is the better and safer approach. So let's go through again and what we're doing. So what array formula is telling us to do is it's telling us that we're not only going to be looking at a particular cell on a column, we're going to be looking at a particular cell and everything below it. And that kind of is setting the tone for this entire formula. And one of the big things that you'll see when using array formulas is this arrangement where you're telling it to look at a particular cell and the entire column. And you do that by using this little symbol here. If I just wanted it to look at all of C, I would just get rid of that C2. So this symbol here, C:C, basically means all of column C. However, you'll see that that doesn't work. We need to give it that specific starting location, and then it'll work as normal. All right. We need to then take in our brain that same formula that we want it to do, which is I want it to multiply this times this. But actually, you only want this cell to multiply this times this. For all of these, you want it to go down from there. And so that's what the array formula allows you to do without automatically copying and transposing your formulas. So that's why we're telling it C2 to the rest of C and D2 to the rest of D. And so that is automatically going, these formulas will automatically understand that that means you want to look at the rest of the column, but those specific columns, column C and column D. So it's a really, really helpful trick here. And so to go through the formulas in a little bit more detail. So the first thing we're doing is we're going to give it a condition. And so anytime you want to use a condition, you're going to start seeing the expression if. So it could be a sumif, a countif, or just if by itself. And anytime you see if, it's a condition. So only if a certain condition is met, then I want you to do something. So in this case, what we want it to do is only do this formula if something has been written in our column C. If it's empty, we don't want it to do anything. So if there's nothing here, it doesn't do anything. That's what we want. So we're going to start with the formula if. All right, so then what is our if? Our if is going to be is blank. And is blank is looking at a particular cell to see if something is empty or not empty. And so we're going to use the expression is blank. And then we're going to look at where is the is blank that we want to check. It's going to be column C. But because we're using an array formula, we write it like this. So we give it the specific cell to look at and then the rest of the entire column. If you were just using an is blank by itself, you could just put the particular cell or an entire column, up to you. And normally an is blank would be looking at a specific cell, right? And then you'd copy that formula downwards. But because we're using this in an array formula, we're going to write it like this. So the particular cell plus the entire rest of that same column, okay? Now, we're done with the is blank expression. The formula ends there. So this is the thing that we're looking for. We're looking for if row C is blank. And then the next section of the if formula is going to be what is the value if this is true. And so that is this little empty section right here. And you'll see that the text turns green when you move to that section of the formula. And so the value if true, and what do we mean by true? Well, if is blank is in fact blank. So if column C is in fact blank, it is empty, that's true. If that's true, we want it to do nothing. So to do nothing, I'm just going to put these two quotes here, and what that'll do is it'll make it say nothing. Anything that is between those quotes will appear here. I could type NA like that, and now what we would get is all these NAs in these empty rows forever, right? I can make it say whatever I want, you know? So instead of typing NA, we're just going to put two quotes with nothing in between them, and that basically will mean that it returns an empty cell. And then the next part is, well, what if it's false? So what do we mean by false? We're again talking about our if condition. So if row C is not empty, in other words, this expression is false, then we want it to do something. Then we want it to make a calculation. And the calculation that we want to do is C times D. Very easy. So we just do C times D, but again, because we're using an array formula, we write it in this format. So the particular cell times, and then on downward for the rest of the cell, times the next column, next cell, times the rest of that column. And then we close out that first formula, which is going to be this one here. This is our value if false section. Then we close out our next section, which is our entire if formula. And then finally, we close out the last section, which is the whole array formula, and we're done. And that automatically applies that formula to everything in this row, and you never have to worry about copying a formula again. And you can come up here to E and go to protect that sheet. And so what that will do is then make sure that nobody can edit this range. So I'd select column E, come over to data, protect sheets and ranges, and then we can say lock total formula. And it says there, yep, what is the range? Well, it's going to be sheet number 1, which is down here, this thing, sheet 1, and it's going to be column E. And then you can set the permissions, and this will literally allow you to enter the emails of who can edit this range, and anybody else who has access to this will not be able to edit this particular range. They'll be able to edit everything else, but they won't be able to mess with this range. And the great trick of this is that what that basically means is that if somebody else has access to this file, they can enter their numbers here, they can do whatever they want, but they can't mess with this column. If they try to mess with this column, it'll say, nope, sorry, you don't have permission to mess with this column. So it's a really great way of protecting your formulas from accidental mistakes. All right. Okay, that's going to wrap up our introduction of this technique, as well as a brief introduction to array formulas, if and is blank. So that was a longer one. I hope you guys were able to follow along, and I hope you guys understand the usefulness of this kind of formula. It's a really powerful little trick that you can do. And in the next video, we're going to rehearse it again by practicing some more advanced use of the date functions. All right. So that's going to close it up for this one. And that's going to be my last video for today, I think.